Tangible Hope Podcast. My name is Willie Elliott, and I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. And my co-host is Melinda Lewis, a professor of practice at the University of Kansas. If you find this episode informative and want to be sure others hear it, please hit the like button and subscribe. It only takes a second and it helps others find the podcast. Also, you can find links to previous episodes and related materials in the description or show notes. David, maybe you can start us off by telling our listeners a little about yourself and how you came to researching children's savings accounts.
Right. So, hello, everybody. Hello, Melinda. Hello, Willie. Thanks for having me today. It's a real honor to be here. So, usually I'm more like on the other side of this podcast, meaning that I am a listener. So, I'm very happy and humbled to be on that side today.
But you're more than equipped and able, and you have a lot to say. So we're excited to have you on this side of the camera.
Way to say that. But more than a listener of this podcast, I'm also a quantitative sociologist. I'm based in Italy, and I do program evaluation, mostly in the education field. I work in a non-profit research organization, which is based in the northern part of Italy. We do program evaluation, again, in the field of education mostly. The name of the institute is the Research Institute for the Evaluation of Public Policies, and we are part of a big research foundation, which is called Fondazione Bruno Kessler. And it's been like almost 10 years that I've been somehow involved in evaluation research on asset building programs for education. It all started by chance. Basically, I was asked to be part of a evaluation research team, and thereafter I've liked the topic, and I'm still doing research on this topic.
But why were they studying assets? Because quite frankly, I don't think I've known you for 10 years. And so it's kind of shocking to me that you've been studying assets for 10 years. And so why were they looking at assets? Why was it important in Italy? I don't know. Just curious.
Well, it all started from a program that is called Percorsi. Percorsi is a program that was launched by a philanthropic foundation based in Italy, in another part of Italy, that ran around 2009 when the big crisis hit Europe. They came up with the idea of setting up a new sort of financial aid program for low-income students that could complement and integrate the standard financial aid policy that exists in Italy. And they kind of liked the idea of the work that was done by Sheridan, and they read the book that was written by Sheridan in the 90s. And they also knew about an OECD report that was spread in the early 2000, and so they came up with this idea of innovative idea in the context of Italy of using a savings-based mechanism in order to help low-income families to pay for their children's education. So this is how I was involved only as part of their evaluation team. I wasn't actually doing research on assets. I was basically only a program evaluator, an assistant program evaluator. And then 10 years after, I would say that I'm very much into the topic, and I like the topic, and I like doing research, not only evaluation on this topic.
And let me say one more quick thing, is that David's work in the U.S. is really important because he's one of the first people to have data and do analysis on kind of children in a CSA program going to college, which, we started these programs long before kind of you were doing research on them, but our kids were starting at birth or kindergarten. And so you were giving us clues to things that we had not yet been able to research ourselves. So very excited to have you on today. Sorry, Melinda, but I just wanted to.
No, me too. And we had Dr. Sheridan, a conversation with him a little while ago, and clearly his work and the book and the foundation that he laid is continuing to influence program development and research in many parts of the world. So it's a nice kind of full circle to talk to someone who's deeply involved in the work in a particular place around the world. Can you give us maybe a little bit, oh, Willie?
Real quick.
I want a little bit more about Percosi. I think it would be helpful for folks to know a bit about the design. One of the things that anybody who has paid attention to children's savings accounts or children's asset initiatives for very long at all knows that there's a lot of difference in the design and the like specifications in the umbrella of children's assets. So Willie can interject something, but that's where I would like you to go next. Give us a little bit of like a, kind of elevator speech of what does the program look like, and so that people then have a context for understanding some of the outcomes that you're seeing.
She has the deep questions. Mine's much less deep. Have you ever met Dr. Shredden?
Yeah, I met him at the conference that you and
Oh yeah,
others
yeah, yeah.
organized in 2019 in Ann Arbor.
Has he ever come to Italy to speak or been on a webinar or spoke?
Not yet. I hope he does it
So
soon.
we should talk.
Yeah, that's good.
Now back to the real content. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted you, and your reports, there's obviously information that our listeners can access elsewhere. You don't have to tell everybody
Sure.
everything they should know about Percosi, but if you can help them understand, what the program looks like, so that then when we talk about, to Willie's point, like some of what you're seeing in higher educational outcomes, post-secondary outcomes, folks have a bit of understanding of what is happening that is leading to that.
Yeah, so let me say that one of the reasons why we were able to estimate effects of this program on post-secondary education outcomes is because the program starts late, right? It doesn't start when children are very young or when they are born. It starts when students are in the like 12th or 13th grade, so in high school, towards the end of high school. So it's a short term, a very short term program, and another thing that is different as compared to the standard CSA, if I can state, if I can state that there is a standard CSA, it is the following thing: is that it provides a very high match rate. So the monies that the low income families save is like multiplied by 4 if these resources are spent for post-secondary education. And another feature which is I think is relevant here is that the program allows for a very broad variety of expenditures related to education. Just to give you some examples, you can use the program to pay for tuition fees, but also to pay for transportation, for books or internet connection, for buying a computer, provided that you use it for education, right? It's also a program that it's a high touch program, meaning that there is participants are like followed and assisted throughout their participation. Um, just to give you like an example of the amount of money we are talking about is that families can save up to 2,000 euros, which is approximately $2,000 through a period of 6 years, and so they can accumulate something so $8,000 in if they let's say if they exploit the mechanism to its maximal extent. So at the end of the program, they can have like the $2,000 saved plus $8,000, which is great if you compare it to the cost of university and post-secondary education in Italy, which is different from very different from the UK. So there are from the US. I'm sorry. There are big relevant contextual differences between Italy, so the post-secondary education system in Italy, the financial aid policy, as compared to the US.
Let me say a couple quick things on that. So even though you're not in the kind of standard CSA application. I will say, like when the seed demonstration occurred, and there was his original kind of studies around children's savings accounts in the U.S. Some of the programs did start later. Also, even in Melinda's kind of hometown in Kansas, the program there starts later as well. So and when those programs start later, they tend to have a much higher match, even in the U.S. context. So because you have less time to save, right? And so that makes perfect sense. I think some of those things overlap quite well. Can you give us kind of the average cost of college in Italy? It doesn't have to be exact, just kind of what your understanding of maybe
Yeah,
the
well,
cost of college.
yeah, sure. Think about the average, the typical tuition fee is about $1,500
So
or
the 8,000 is a whole lot of money then
yeah.
for college.
That's
We're
the
like
tuition.
here,
Yeah, that's tuition fees, right? But then you have, of course, you have to live. So you have transportation, you have food, you have books to buy, and you have foregone earnings, right? So there are direct costs and indirect costs associated to post-secondary education. So I would say it's a very large, substantial contribution. The one that is provided by this program, it doesn't cover everything, but it covers a substantial part of the cost, provided that you like basically that you live as a student, you live in your home and you study in your home university. Because if you have to move, then of course you have rent to pay, and things get, of course, difficult. Plus, I would say, I think it's important to say that if costs of university are low as compared to the US, uh, the standard financial aid policy in Italy is also low. So the coverage that is provided by the state, the Italian state, in terms of grants or tuition waivers is really affecting a low proportion of students, and it's not enough to cover for all the expenses. Plus, there are several criticalities connected to financial aid policy in Italy, which is timing first, because you know it when it's too late if you are eligible for a grant, because you apply for a grant once you apply for college. So it's hard to imagine that financial aid can have an effect on your probability to enroll in college. Plus, which is a shame in the Italian context. I mean, it has been, especially in the past. Now things have a little bit improved. Um, it's a very unreliable policy. So you can't predict whether you really are gonna get it. Yeah, because funds in some years have been cut without any planning for that. So families are really couldn't really rely on that form of financial aid. So there are low cost, but the policies are not in a good shape. So there is a motivation for innovative interventions such as percorsi. And a further motivation, a further contextual information that I think it's important to know for a US audience is that Italy has a very, very low proportion of tertiary graduates in the population, right? So one of the lowest in Europe, one of the lowest among the OECD countries. And one of the reasons is the high level of inequality that exists in Italy in terms of educational attainment. So I think Italy has one of the highest gaps in the probability of graduating from college between students who have parents that graduated themselves versus parents that are not graduated, right? So it's a situation which is worrisome because of low attainment levels connected with high inequality levels.
When you said you described the program as high touch, who does that? The touching, who supports students? Is that a part of the financial aid system? I was thinking yes, but
Mm.
now hearing some of the inconsistencies and challenges there, is that this philanthropic institution that started it. Can you help us understand what supports does the program provide that help students get to and through their higher education? Because that's the part that I want to go to next, some of the outcomes that you have been seeing on higher educational attainment.
Yeah, so this philanthropic foundation, which is called Ufficio Pio, this is the organization which started experimenting with asset building programs for education in Italy. So what they do is they assist families in like opening the savings account. They assist them with doing the expenditures that are allowed for the program. They also provide targeted financial education to youths, and in some cases also to parents in the very first years. Targeted financial education because it's connected to like education planning, and so education expenditures, not general financial education. Yeah, that was it.
Okay, no, thank you. That's helpful. I mean, that's another thing for us to be thinking about. What are the different ways that other institutions, other investments in educational attainment need to complement the match and the initial deposits and the financial support of a children's savings account in order to get students through and to the point of higher education. Can you talk a bit? I do want to talk a little bit about savings rates, because that was one thing that certainly stood out to me in the report and in thinking about what the program is achieving with families in Italy. But first, can we talk a bit about education itself? As Willie said, this is kind of newer territory for us in looking at what can children's savings accounts, these account structures, realize in outcomes for higher education. And so I'm going to look at my notes so that I don't get it wrong, but it was seeing a 13% increase in enrollment and a 15% increase in persistence in higher education. Can you talk a bit about what kind of at least initial conclusions your evaluation has reached in terms of, there's some differences in some of those effects for students who are differently situated? Just can you unpack that a little bit? Because it stands out probably to anyone who is listening and anyone who looks at the report who knows that this is the kind of next frontier for children's asset research. And those are big numbers in terms of the outcomes that you're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. They are big numbers. At first, we couldn't believe them, but now we are pretty sure about the numbers, and I will try and explain them. So first, it's a technical note, but I would like to make it still very, very, very quickly. So these estimates are based on a randomized control trial. So they are estimates that are highly reliable in terms of they have a high level of internal validity. As you correctly said, so the program managed to increase enrollment rates by 13%. And it also increased second year enrollment, so persistent to the second year, by 15%. So these are large numbers, and I would like to stress also the fact that even if we don't observe yet college completion, by looking at persistence and by observing that the effects are stable, they're even slightly bigger. So we were happy, because this is an indication that the program didn't push students to do something they weren't able to carry on. Like, so it didn't push students to enroll at the university and then drop out right after, just to exploit this large grant kind of they were receiving. So this is, I think, is something that needs to be stressed. Then, as you said, the effects were found to be heterogeneous across students group, and something that was very notable in terms of magnitude of the heterogeneity of the effects is the kind of high school students were coming from. Here, a contextual note: the Italian secondary education system is split into three different tracks. We have academic oriented general schools, then we have technical schools, and we have vocational schools. So vocational schools are typically for students that are not planning to go to college, whereas academic schools are, on the contrary, for typically for students that plan to go to college afterwards. And what we observe is that the effects are very, very much stronger among students coming from vocational schools, which are also students who are more vulnerable in terms of past academic performance, and they also come from more disadvantaged families in terms of socioeconomic conditions, right? So in that sense, the program was kind of effective in reducing the opportunity gaps between different groups of students. I was mentioning that yes, the effects are very large. It's not so common to find so large effects. These data on which these estimates are based are coming from a survey. And everything went smoothly. I'm not bothering you with details, but everything in the process went smoothly. But still, now we are also looking at administrative data, so from universities, and first to replicate these results, and initial findings go in this direction. So we are able to replicate the findings using administrative data. And second, we are also looking at administrative data to explore, to estimate completion rates, right? And in order to have final results on these outcomes, we need to wait, I guess, a little bit more, like 1 or 2 years, because one of the things that happens in Italy is that students enroll to university, and then they take a longer period in order to complete university. We are also exploring labor market data using, again, administrative data. And this is going to, I think this is quite interesting because it allows us to uh, um, explore whether students were working or not during college years. So one of the assumptions is that the program could like facilitate students to concentrate on their academic work rather than needing to take up small jobs in order to sustain their study. And this could also help them like finish on time. We use the same administrative data in order to explore also whether after college we see an effect on college on labor market attainment. And we are also planning to run a survey to investigate attitudes and savings behaviors and future orientation of the students in order to shed light also on these issues.
I think it was a good point that you brought up with regard to persistence, and that being a policy point, that these students aren't just simply, oh, I have some extra money, so I'll go to college for a little while, but with
Mm-hmm.
no real intentions of, what that means for their future or staying or sticking. So I think that is something that we haven't probably discussed directly within the context of the U.S. Certainly indirectly, but not directly have thought about that as much. But I think it's a good point. We talk about college graduation and these kinds of things, but not in the sense that there are policies that people get waves of money and they do things quickly, but really nothing comes out of that, right? So I think that was a good point. I'll also say that I think you're trying to lead the way again, which is both fortunate and unfortunate for me, uh, as a researcher, that you're going to have data. I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking at kind of the post college outcomes,
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
something that we have tried to look at secondarily data, but haven't had the chance, obviously, as of yet, to look at that through our CSA programs. We're just getting to the point now in the U.S. where we have kids entering college. We'll be having results come out this fall from some of our major programs, but we're years away from being able to talk about post college graduation. But even that talk I gave with you uh, to the ILI audience was about the return on degree and the importance of that. So I think that's great.
Mhm. Willie, I want, if you can stay in this part of the conversation a bit more too, thinking about, we started with talking about this program being designed as a complement to financial aid. And that's something that you've been thinking about in lots of different ways. In the US, where can financial aid fuel children's savings and be leveraged to be asset building? And this is kind of looking at that from another angle. How can children's savings be a hook to get families thinking about and then, activating around financial aid earlier? But they're both about the kind of ways that income flows in financial aid and assets in a CSA can complement each other, and families can then experience the potential effects of both. I just would like for you two to talk a bit about what you see as those potential connections and some of the challenges in trying to make those systems really complement each other.
Let me, and then David, you can disagree with me here because I don't know the Italy context as well. But just giving the amount, and while in some ways you poo-pooed the difference in amount, I mean it's significant. Like so in the U.S., when we think about children's savings accounts as they now exist, there's conversations going on about making them large dollar and adding baby bonds and things to it. But right now, there's small dollar accounts, right? And that's really important to the political context and how people even see them within the context of financial aid, because they're not seen as a vehicle for paying for college or even making a really substantial dent in the college debt, right? Because of the cost of college, I should say, because you're just not going to have large amounts of money in accounts relative to the cost of college in the U.S. And so they are seen then as very much a complement to existing financial aid. They can't be seen as a replacement for the student debt program, for example, because you would still have this glaring gap in between what they had saved and had in their account and what the cost of college is. And so I think that really makes the conversation somewhat differently. When I think about it, the way I would leverage and think about within an Italy context would be different. I would think about as opposed to complementing other what you have described as very unstable mechanisms, financial aid
Mm-hmm.
mechanisms. I would say this can be a replacement for those in thinking about the government investing in CSAs as a way of financing education that might be more viable. Now, with the investment of the federal government, you might have a larger investment, so they might even have more in those accounts than they're getting in your research study, right? But even within your research study, they're covering a lot more of the cost than would typically be picked up by financial aid or what they could trust on, right? And this could be a very much more trustworthy program, might be more politically acceptable because it also has the individual investing in the right. And so to me, there's a very
Mm.
different context in the way we would think about them. We're trying to get to where you're at, in that we're now thinking about, we have like free college ideas and things like that. How do we connect those with a CSA and put that money into an account early on? What is the advantage to kids growing up with that account? And why is that important, not only for preparing kids for college and helping them enroll in college, but get them through college and how they leave college? And so our discussions in some ways are slightly different, but I think there is overlap. You benefit from not having a really exploitive education system with really high costs. Not to say that it's not, but you also have a different kind of economy. And so even though it's
Yeah.
less money, it has the same negative effects on them, but the CSA policy can better address it. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, I personally agree with everything you said. Actually, but I'm struggling to say something smart about Italy in how these programs, this CSA program, can actually feed into the standard financial aid policy. Because the situation at the moment is the following: so we have been able to provide nice experimental evidence on that specific local program run by a
Mm.
philanthropic organization, which is not like in the government, right? So not even in a regional local government. It's a philanthropic organization, and this evidence has been received very well in the community of like the asset building internationally, and um, and also in Italy, there have been some spillover like kind of programs. So other similar kind of organizations, still local non-government organizations, have launched at least like 3, 4 other CSA programs of this kind, very similar to Percorsi, but targeted to younger students, like primary to lower secondary students, with the goal this time of helping them and their families to pay for expenditures during secondary education. So the focus of those programs is a bit different. So is helping students to complete secondary education. Not they're not looking at post-secondary education. And I'm not saying, I mean, it's
Great.
different, but it's also relevant because Italy is affected by very high dropout rates during high school as well, right? So the earlier you start, the better it is in order to like improve educational opportunity for everybody. So, but uh, but I was saying, so we have a good experimental evidence. We're gonna have other experimental evidence on the other programs, but this evidence has not entered the debate in Italy about a reform of
To the
a
policy.
financial aid policy.
Let me say something on that though. This is not unlike what transpired in the US 15, 20 years ago, right? I mean, these conversations were very much like you're talking about now. In like us talk about the seed demonstration, the original kind of test of CSAs were run by local organizations, right? And one of the things that was learned out of that is that you need to be better situated within federal governments if we're trying to get to scale, right? And so I don't think, but I think what is different though, and maybe I'm going to challenge you, David,
Yes.
is that we intentionally, Melinda was quite involved in this in the early stages of this, try to take the research and put it into different formats and enter it into those conversations. Like we purposely worked at not just publishing journal articles or producing reports, but how do we begin to help policymakers, the greater public understand the potential value of these findings for how we think, and you're ripe for it, right? I mean, in that you have such a dysfunctional kind of financial aid system that's looking for solutions. We talked about Thomas Kuhn and scientific revolutions and kind of the state of financial aid as it was at that point in time, right? So we try to use things like that to help people understand why it was ripe for revolution and ripe for change, right? And so I just think it's just that there needs to be some intentional efforts, which is extra energy and time, at bringing these things to the forefront of educators, policymakers, and others, and being intentional about publishing in special in education journals and in education magazines. And right, I mean, we did a lot of work on that. And so where we're at now is just kind of from that fruit of that work over those years. And I think you can get there faster because you should lean on some of the U.S. work and the policy advancements in states and things like that, and how it's been done, that how it transitioned. Because I've even found within the states, moving from small dollar to large dollar, since we have all the other evidence, is an easier step, right? The fact that we have the data in Italy, it makes it easier for us in the US. We use that data to talk about the potential of CSAs for changing college outcomes. So I think in this way we can help each other, and it's just a matter of being intentional and purposeful about entering those conversations.
Well, and of course, children's savings accounts are not just about achieving educational outcomes, but also financial security and hopefully financial mobility, helping people to use their asset base as a launch pad. Willie's got some new publications that are talking about, like rocket ships and people being able to move from where they are and to truly launch. And your savings rate, again, and you're, it's an apt point to make. This is experimental evidence that you are accumulating, not, policy wins, at least not yet. But the evidence on the savings front is really quite astonishing, honestly, to those of us who have, seen Dr. Sheridan's work that definitively answered the question so many years ago: can the poor save? Yes, absolutely, and do, and did before there were children's savings account structures, right? But your evidence of, was it 94% of participants made deposits, is not what we see in CSA programs at all. So I think that it could be helpful to think, and I'd love to hear from you about a bit about the context. Like, was that as surprising to you as the 13 and 15% increases on the post-secondary front? Or does just everybody save in Italy? I mean, I just read that and was one of the ones that I looked back at the report and I was like, 94%. Like, that's, wow. And it says so much to me, I think, potentially about how families see this tool, what they are willing to sacrifice, probably, at least for some. I imagine that is some sacrifice to make a deposit in this account for the future. So I don't want to just talk about education, because we know that children's assets aren't just about education, but also about families' financial capability and the financial foundation they're
Real
laying for their
quick,
future.
if I remember right, was there a requirement around saving to participate? Right, which is almost like Canada in some ways.
Yeah,
Very unlike the U.S.
Yeah, that's. I think the answer to your question, Melinda, is in how the program is designed, right? So, and I will start by saying that so it's an opt-in program, right? So you ask to participate in the program. So in a way, you already anticipate that you will have to save, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't apply. I would say that this is part of the explanation. Another part of the explanation is that there are strict rules, as Willie was saying. So you kind of have to, you kind of commit to save regularly that small amount of money. And as I was saying, there are case manager, there are the program staff is always there, like motivating you and reminding you about doing that. So I think so the big, so the answer is in how the program is designed. But it is true that the context is different, right, as compared to the US probably. So Italy in general, has, at least in the past, has a history of being a country of savers. So it has very relatively high savings rate. Although this is no longer true. So in the past years, this saving rate has gone down. Um, but again, I think the big part of the explanation is in how the program is designed. But it doesn't mean that, please go ahead.
I really want to, because this is really important stuff. Because I want to sift through it for a second. One quick question is, because I don't remember exactly, what are the rules about saving? Right? You mentioned the first part. So I would tell you that just because they opt in, we have a lot of opt-in programs that still don't have the same savings rates.
Right.
And then we have a lot of people making a lot of contact with people after they're in the program about saving. That doesn't increase saving rates either. I think so. Let me answer that question first. I have something else to say that I want to say on this. I think it's important. But what is the exact rule? I mean, do they have to save? Are they required to save each month? Do they get a penalty if they don't?
Yeah, exactly. They had to save between 5 and 30 euros a month. And they were allowed to skip very few. No, it was between €5 and €50. Sorry, they were allowed to skip 1 or 2 months on basic. That was the basic rule. Of course, there were exceptions because families struggle, but the arrangement was the one in which if you skip some months, then you're kind of invited to accumulate a bit more in the following months. So families were really kind of yeah,
Let me
very much incentivized to save regularly.
let me say one thing about that. So I think there's two important things about that. One is I've done a lot of talking about, you know, kind of one of my critiques is the right word, of Shred and some of the institutional pieces is that it's like capitalism. We don't have pure capitalism, right? It doesn't exist. We don't have pure institutionalism. Pure institutionalism in a CSA program would be the money automatically comes out of their accounts, right? So when we talk about institutional theory, we say people say because they're involved in institutions, but in the way they're constructed in the U.S., they're not. We don't have the freedom to do that, right? I mean, to make those kind of restrictions on them, people would not go for here at this time, and so it's very, very much up to them whether or not they save or not. And what we find is that, but this reinforces institutional theory, right? If you put them in a structure where it's mandatory to save, they save, right? If you don't, then they don't, right? There's a whole lot. I think that's really, really important. And I should have been citing you in thinking about this and talking about this. I think it makes it so evident. Canada does this slightly because some of their programs require savings too, but it depends which one you sign up into. Secondly, I will say that I think you're still at, because of the prices of your college, we lived in an era, and I talk about it all the time in some of my writing, is that where people would, people, you still hear it now, even though it's ridiculous, is people will say, well, I just worked my way through college. Well, not when it's $20,000 a year, $80,000 over 4 years. You're not working your way through college, right? And so, but we still have residents within the U.S. of that mindset, and so people don't think about saving early on for college. They don't think or planning for college until they get to high school. Even the schools, a lot of them don't really start planning for college until kids at high school, right? And so there's that mindset, that culture to overcome. Whereas it's still very attainable because of the price of it. If you're in a structured savings program, it feels and is achievable with matches and stuff to pay for college. In the US, that's not the case. People still recognize that there's going to be a great shortfall. And that also goes back to why I think it has been so relevant to making CSAs fit within the existing financial aid structure and not a replacement or a substitute for it, because it's just so unattainable for most people to be able to save enough through income.
So where I think we probably only have time. I only have time to ask one more question, and that kind of is connects to the name of the podcast is about tangible hope, and thinking about your comments about Italy and how the uncertainty around the existing financial aid system means that even with, to Willie's point, even with a relatively low tuition and fee structure, it just still doesn't necessarily help families have expectations that their kid can go to post-secondary education and to be able to really to plan on that. So what I would love to hear is, Willie, are there things you see in Italy and in these efforts that you think have import for the United States, and thinking about what makes hope tangible or what can? And I'd love to hear, in Italy, are there things that you're looking at in some of this kind of next wave research, not only at outcomes post secondary education, but really how this kind of initiative changes not just the amount of money folks have, but how they feel and what they believe is really possible and valuable for themselves and for their
So I
student.
think you directed it at me first, so I'll be short.
Yes,
I would say two
great.
things. One is I think it does bring me back to that paper we originally talked about that we're going to write that kind of brings together the international evidence. I think it's important for helping you and us be able to use the data from both places to influence policy in both places, right? So one of the outcomes of that paper should be is to see we've discussed very large differences between Italy and the US, but there still are at heart, we also talked about quite similarities. Like there's similarities in the structure of the programs and how they work. And so there's things we can learn from each and should affect each policy. So I think that paper would be very useful for that. Secondly, with tangible hope, I take a little bit different approach to it. I will say, I will look at it from the standpoint of looking at what Italy has done with regard to savings rates through using an institutional structure that is not available to us here in the US, and how that should build
Mm.
both understanding of the limitations of our current system for building savings. And I've tried to talk to programs about that. They always say, well, how can I build more savings? Well, I'm going to talk to families more. That's not really going to do it because it's not institutional structure. If Sheridan is right, then it's really about that. And we can see some evidence of that. So it should give us some sense of hope that while the savings rates aren't the same unless we provide them with an institutional structure that makes savings more mandatory, which also probably has to be tied to some child tax credit or something else that provides low income families with the money to save. If we're going to ask them and make it mandatory for them to save, then we need some of those things. So to me, it gives us somewhat of a hope as a field that our low savings rates are really good among general Americans and in our what we should reasonably expect within this program, but that to the degree that we can figure out how to build in more of these institutional structures to saving, the more likely we are to see larger savings rates. The larger saving rates are possible. They're just about the institutional structure, and what we have right now is not good enough for achieving that part of what we want to achieve.
So
To make hope truly tangible for kids in the United States. So, I mean, I saw Osterman cited in some of your work. I know you're thinking about expectations, and you talked about the tenuous nature of financial aid in Italy and how people just you can't hang your hopes on a program that might go away next year or has gone away in the past. Are there things that you're looking at around expectations and motivation and college saving identities in Italy, and kind of where does tangible hope and this concept maybe figure into some of that next step
yeah,
in your research?
that's a really important question, and I think I'm gonna disappoint you because basically we don't know much about the possible mechanisms that are behind the effects that we have seen on the educational outcomes, right? So we don't know whether it is the money they receive through the match rate. We don't know whether it is savings per se, uh, and we don't know whether it is college bound identity or educational expectation, right? So we have we wouldn't we haven't been able to disentangle this possible mechanism, but this is something that we are planning to do. So we have done some little qualitative research, and we are planning to do other qualitative research in order to shed light on how families feel about um, yeah, being enrolled in such a program, and in terms of how they see the future of their kids. And we are also exploring through a survey. We are going to explore later this year the future orientation of parents and students. So how they look at the future and how their time preferences change or not because of their participation in the program. Um, yeah, but in general, so at the moment we don't have much evidence on this part, but some evidence on another program that we are evaluating, which is called WILL, and it's targeted to students at secondary education.
Did you see
And
they named that after me, Melinda?
yeah, of course, of course, of
Yes,
course, of course.
yes,
I
That's
know.
right.
that's good,
I
good,
can
good.
tell. Yeah. They might have your photo, Willie. I don't know, but
Yeah,
that would be a good idea.
yeah. Your headshot is going to be the logo of the article.
Okay, good.
Scare a lot of people.
Yeah. No. So there we see that parents like they develop higher educational expectation and aspiration for their children, especially parents that have lower income. I mean, all the programs we are talking about in Italy are targeted to low income families, but if you split the sample in below and upper the income median in our samples, then you see that in the lowest part of this of the income groups, then you see that there is an effect on aspiration and expectations, which is promising, and perhaps it goes in the direction of answering your question.
One quick thing on that. I think, in as much as you develop that research, it has been one of the things that politically has really helped in the U.S. because there is a kind of waning of the American dream and that sense of hope in that. And I think you would have the same thing in Italy. I don't know. Is that there is a great need for instilling that hope in people that education can be a path to greater success and that it's attainable and all these things. And so, to the degree that you get evidence around that, I think it will help you with some of your policy discussions as well, because it's a really relevant concept towards, and people get really easily like that there is a lack of hope among kids and among families, and that this can be very discouraging
Mhm.
for them trying to seek higher education and just better opportunities.
Yeah, and that vague dreams. I mean, I know even telling people the name of the podcast and what we're talking about, I think that idea that kids need something they can count on, not just things that sound cool for their future, in order to actually change behavior and change, the outcomes on the way to college, in order to change what they can do in college and beyond. Willie, either of you, do you have anything else that you want to say as concluding comments? Thank you so much for being here and for sharing these insights and, truly kind of inspirations from what you can learn from an experiment and an investment in the future of young people. I don't have any more questions. I just want you to have a chance to say anything else
Real
that
quick,
you'd like
David's a rock star on the
us.
podcast. Go, David. David, you didn't think you'd be a rock star, but you are, man. I can't wait to see this one go live.
All right. That was really great for me joining this podcast. So thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Looking forward
It's
to
an
working
honor.
with you.
Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. I look forward to reading more as the evaluation continues, and we can try to find connections where they make sense,
I'm
across
totally in.
the
I'm totally
across
in.
the
That's
pond,
great.
so to
Hey,
speak.
Melinda, are we supposed to say something concluding
Yeah.
this? I forget.
Oh, well, you said it in the beginning, but I'll say it again. So wait, I don't have it as notes though, but I can do it. I can do it. Thank you for listening. We have some exciting episodes coming up. So if you want to make sure you don't miss those, you can like and subscribe so that you can get it in whatever feed you use to receive your
Thank you.
podcast.